Hi, I'm David Corby, a mind body medicine practitioner and the director of the College Complementary Medicine, and I'm here to talk about mind body medicine and its approach, quite a unique approach to back pain. When you think about back pain, what do you normally think? What causes back pain? Some people would say, well, my back pain is caused because my muscles get sore. They maybe get tight, or maybe they say, oh, but that's because I've got poor posture. Or they might say that it's caused by a disc problem, and so there's more nerve pain and so on. All these things are one perspective on back pain. But from a mind-body medicine perspective, we need to look more broadly to look at what are the root causes rather than more what specific physiology causes a symptom. It's more like, well, how do we get that physiology in the first place? The way I would look at back pain is that pain itself usually, mostly comes from muscles being too tight or muscles being fatigued and causing pain, maybe getting inflamed because they're overactive all the time. This, of course, is caused by poor posture. And I think you would say that most of people that work on back pain would say that posture is a critical component of back pain. Really, no matter what their discipline, they would think posture is important. Now, of course, posture is not something that's God given. Posture is something that happens over a period of time. It's a response to how we move in life. See, our posture is a dynamic thing. It's something that comes because of the way we've continually been moving. Our movement habits, if you like, cause posture. Now, of course, the key question then is, well, what causes us to move in certain ways? Why would some people move in a certain way that causes a particular posture and other people move in a different way causing a different posture? And the answer to that, of course, it comes down to the brain and how the brain's directing the muscles, because the muscles don't direct themselves. It's the brain that directs the movement that ultimately produces the posture. And so those brain directions, they come through the motor pathways. And there are a complex series of pathways. There is the local spinal segment level, which causes muscles to react in certain ways. There's the pathways further up inside the brain itself, so like the brainstem, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, the motor cortex. They're all areas of the brain that get involved with directing movement. Now, ultimately, though, you have to ask the question, well, why would the brain get it wrong? Why would I have a poor posture and poor movement when someone else has good posture, good movement? And of course, much of the time that comes down to the survival areas of the brain. Because as soon as the survival emotion is triggered, okay, our posture will change, our movement will change. Because all the survival areas, for example, the amygdala, which is the key survival emotion center, when it's triggered, it has very large projections to all the motor centers, so it actually causes changes in posture directly. So in other words, whenever I feel fear, whenever I feel more like a rage, whenever I have a problem with anxiety, excessive vigilance, these style of survival-based emotions actually cause changes in my structure and how I move. So that's just basic neurology. There are other things that can impede the motor pathways functioning well that really relate more to how how well the brain is coordinating sensory information and then being able to use the sensory information to coordinate the body well. That's more a brain function level problem. So whether it's emotion-led or brain functional neurology-led, both those factors are obviously critical factors underpinning how we move and our posture. So given that, it's very interesting when we think about how back pain is generally treated. If we say looking at a physio or chiro or a massage therapist or an acupuncturist, generally these people are looking more at the physical components of the body. Like maybe the physio, they might do work directly on the muscles. Of course, many physios will give corrective exercises that will also impact some of the muscle coordination and the brain aspect of things, because if you do corrective exercises, it hopefully repatterns the motor programs. The chiro, of course, is adjusting the spine. That can have an impact on the neurology as well. So, but the primary focus is more on the spine and on the physical structures of the spine, and then how that influences the posture. And then, of course, the massage therapist directly works on the muscles, and the acupuncturist also generally will needle to affect the muscles. So their primary focus of all these people really is more on the body than it is on the mind. Now, of course, individual practitioners may have a broader viewpoint than that, but the basic structure of the modality is that way. So you've got to think then, okay, well, who's the person who is looking at the neurology and the mind, how it affects the posture? And of course, at the moment you would say, well, there's not a lot there, is there? But of course, we have now mind-body medicine, which of course fits right in that niche. Because what it does is it addresses all aspects of this problem. And from a mind-body medicine practitioner point of view, the mind and the body are the same thing. They're codependent and interdependent. The mind ranges through the body, through the peripheral nervous system, and so it's really like the mind is part of the body. But equally, the body has a big impact on the mind, either through nutrients and fluids, but also through chemicals that influence how the mind processes things, how we feel and what we think. So if we're looking specifically at back pain, for a mind-body medicine practitioner, all these different factors here are taken into account. So for example, we may look at balance, because if you have poor balance, then that will affect all the movement patterns. We may look at the fascia directly, trying to work with the physical structures of the muscles or the binding tissue that may be too tight. We might look at the jaw, because the jaw itself can have a major impact on not just the cranium but the rest of the body, particularly the pelvis. And when we look at pelvis, we look not just at the pelvic positioning, but also look at all the muscles that underpin how the pelvis sits. Trigger point therapy for particular sore muscles. Muscle testing to work out what muscles are problematic and what aren't. Acupressure, of course, to relieve the pain. Movement patterns are critical, and for that we may look at how the person's moving, whether the specific movements are causing problems, and what muscles are related to those specific movements, and then trace back from that what muscles need to be worked on. The psychology obviously is going to be critical, because it drives a lot of the survival emotions, which ultimately drive how we move. So when we feel a certain way, it will affect our movement patterns directly, and therefore it can easily produce back pain. And then finally, the one I really want to spend a little bit of time on is the neurology underpinning posture, because that is really critical, and I thought it might be useful to really look at that one in a bit more detail. So neurology underpinning posture, what do I mean by that? Well, there's lots of things that we can mean by that. So for example, just how we move, okay? If I'm poorly coordinated, so if, for example, when I walk, I can't coordinate my arms and my legs, that will impact my posture directly. Okay, it will impact which muscles are overdoing things and which muscles are underdoing things. Now, of course, part of that can be to do with poor reflexes. So by reflexes, I'm talking here about the primitive reflexes. When we're born, we have very little neurology. Okay, so we can't really do anything as a baby We have to learn to do things. So initially, we're given some basic programming. So it's like in a computer, we have a basic operating system, and in our mind, we have these primitive reflexes. They help us to do things like suck on the mother's breast, or to be able to have like a startle reflex that relates to, if there's something that's dangerous, we go, we move away from it, and so on. So there's a number of different reflexes. Now, they're fine when we're, just a baby, but we don't want them to be active as an adult. And of course, what happens sometimes is that these reflexes stay turned on. And when they're turned on, they affect the posture directly, because that's what the reflexes do. They, given a particular input, whether it's head movement, head position, a sound or noise or so on, we then get a certain output, which is certain muscles on, certain muscles off. So that base level of programming, you don't want that to be on when you're walking upright. Okay, it's fine as a baby, but not as an adult. So sometimes a posture can simply be a reflection of these primitive reflexes patterns being on, and so we might look to try to switch them off. In terms of organ function, see, a lot of people don't really think much about the posture and what it means about organ function, but that can be critical. So for example, some people have big curvature in their lumbar spine. It's called lordosis. Now, the typical way of looking at that would be to say, well, that's because their core stability, all their tummy muscles, if you like, or sort of deeper muscles into the tummy, but in that region, those muscles are problematic. So like the pelvic floor, the internal obliques, and so on, these aren't working very well. So that's fine, but then the next question should be asked, and that is why? Now, of course, commonly what's going on is that those muscles in that area are problematic simply because the organs in that area are struggling. So if I have poor digestion, because my digestive organs are struggling, they'll be sending messages through to the spinal segment down in that level. And that can impede muscle function as well at that level. So we already know through neurology studies that pain, for example, in an organ can affect muscles that are innervated at the same spinal segment level. So in other words, if I got digestive pain, it will affect the muscles that get innervated in the nerves come from the same spinal segment as whatever the organ is that is in pain. So, for example, let's say I've got gastric pain. Tightness in some muscles in that area is likely because of these neurological links. Of course, if you get problems with digestion all the time, then you would expect these muscles to all the time have problems. And it's not actually the muscles that are having the problem, it's actually a function of what's going on with the organs. So you need to look more broadly with structure. It's not just about muscles and sinews and so on, but it can relate to actual physical functioning of the body and the physical functioning of the organs, because everything is interconnected through the nervous system. So with mind-body medicine, we really need to look at these links, understand the neurology implicit to this muscle and how it is impacted by these organs and so on. In terms of psychology, there is, our body and how we move, that reflects how we're feeling. You know this. If you're looking at someone and they're walking around, like this, you'd be thinking, oh, they must be sad or depressed or so on, whereas they're, going high there, you'd be thinking something quite different. So implicitly we know this, and there's neurology underpinning this as well. But in mind-body medicine, we map this out. So for example, certain areas of the body relate to certain psychology. It's very useful to know this. So for example, with frozen shoulder, which is quite a common thing that we have to work on, frozen shoulder often relates to issues around grief and loss, because that area of the body often relates to those issues. And so in working with frozen shoulder, I may not just work with the muscles, but we actually might work with the psychology underpinning it. Because if we can process that grief and move on, then of course the shoulder will improve. So putting all that together, then you can see that mind-body medicine really takes a broad approach to working with back pain. It's always useful to have specialists working in these different areas. If you want a massage, best to go to the massage therapist. However, it's also good to have someone who is more of a generalist, who takes a more integrative approach, because many problems require an integrative approach, or are best done with an integrative approach. Now, sometimes that may mean that the mind-body medicine practitioner works on certain elements, and then some other elements are done with another practitioner. That works well. Other times it may be that the critical thing may be the neurology, for example, underpinning the structure, and that the mind-body medicine practitioner is able to make a big difference by working on that. So if you want to learn more about this, then you can find out more by going to the website for myself, www.davidcorby.net. That gives the details for my clinic and so on. Or if you want to know more in terms of coursework and so on, you can go to the College of Complementary Medicine, www.complementary.com.au. If you want to know more about how the mind and the body interact, you could read my book, Finding Joy Within, which you can get on Amazon, or the details of that also are on my website.